Welcome and good evening. Thank you. I'm Carmen Colangelo, the Ralph J. Nagel Dean of the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts. I'm so excited to be here this afternoon to celebrate this wonderful exhibition, Making Their Mark, and the extraordinary collection assembled by Komal Shah and Shah Garg, two visionary members of the Wash U community. They brought their art, but not the weather from California. It's feeling a little warm, but we're so hot is good. Hot is good for the occasion. So it's a hot show. Here we are. Gaurav, a graduate of Wash U, has served on the University Board of Trustees since 2018, and the McKelvey Engineering National Council since 2015. In 2021, Sabine and I were delighted to welcome Komal to the Sam Fox School National Council and the Kemper Art Museum and the Art Collections Committee. These roles highlight their dedication to the museum, the school, and the university as a whole, helping to advance our mission to contribute to contemporary society in a meaningful and impactful way. But let me back up for a moment. When I first met Komal, I immediately felt connected to her immense energy and deep passion for art, especially for women artists and artists of color. Walking across the campus with her to see our art on campus projects, the MFA studios, and the Kemper Collection, I knew we needed to get her more engaged with the school and the museum. I think it also helped a little that her son Bijoy is attending Wash U. I think. And I know he's here, so welcome to all of you. Where did I go from here? So not long after that, we invited Komal to participate in a virtual panel with Adrian Davis, who I'm glad is here, about collecting. Soon after that, I had the most incredible experience of visiting their home in California, seeing their collection firsthand, learning about each piece, and hearing about how deeply they connected with both the work and especially with the artists. Many of the works on view tonight were part of that very memorable visit. Their generous support and leadership have been transformative, not just for the museum and the Sam Fox School, through their lead support for this exhibition, but all across the university and way beyond. I'm deeply grateful for their continued investment in scholarship and research, and most especially for their commitment to supporting artists and the public engagement of art, which I'd argue has never been more important than this moment. Maybe we could say that in many moments, but it's for sure true. Before we begin, I also want to thank the William T. Kemper Foundation for its steadfast support of the museum, as well as members of the Director's Circle, including major annual support from Emily and Ted Greenspan, and additional generous support from Deborah Beckman and Jacob Kotzebue, Michael Foreman and Jennifer Rice, Julie Kemper-Foyer, Joanne Gold and Andrew Stern, David and Dorothy Kemper, Ron and Pamela Mass, and Kim and Bruce Olson, who I know are here tonight. Further support for this exhibition has been provided by the Ortons Lewin Art Fund and the Ken and Nancy Kranzberg Fund and museum members. So let's thank all of them. And of course, I want to extend my utmost thanks to Sabine Eckmann and really the entire Kemper team for this spectacular presentation of the work. As they know, I peeked into the installation multiple times, sometimes in the same day, as it was unfolding, and I love seeing the galleries. I love seeing them take shape and in process. At this time, I'd like to ask our museum staff to put up their hand or stand up and be recognized. They are truly phenomenal. The exhibition is also historical in another way. It is the first at the Kemper to use all the galleries on the main level, space the work truly commands and deserves. Having attended openings in both of the openings in New York and Berkeley, I can honestly say it looks the very best here in St. Louis. Awesome. Komal and Gaurav, we are truly delighted and honored to host it here for sure. Let's thank Komal and Gaurav for the lending the exhibition. Can you stand? Yay. It's so awesome. Now it is my honor to introduce our distinguished panelists who made this exhibition possible. Making Their Mark is a groundbreaking project, expansive in scope and impact. Tonight we welcome Komal Shah and artist Barbara Kasten and the exhibition's co-curators, Cecilia Alemani and Sabine Eckmann. Barbara Kasten lives and works in Chicago. She received her BFA from the University of Arizona in 1959 and MFA from the California College of Arts and then Crafts in 1970. Barbara's practice centers around the exploration of nature, of perception, and materiality. Her photographic output has been essential to the last decade of multidisciplinary work in sculpture, video, installation, and public art. These works continue to examine an object's presence within both illusionistic and real space. Her work has been exhibited across the United States and Europe, and her work, photogenic painting untitled 76/7, is on view here in the Making the Mark exhibition. In addition to the Shah Garg Collection, her work is featured in collections such as Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Guggenheim Museum in New York, Tate Modern in London, and the Centre Pompidou in Paris, among many others. Let's welcome Barbara Kasten. Cecilia Alemani is an Italian curator based in New York City and overall curator of Making Their Mark. Since 2011, she has been the Donald R. Mullen Jr. Director and Chief Curator of Highline Art, the public art program presented in Highline in New York City. She is also the curator of the 12th Site Santa Fe International, which just opened this summer in June 2025. From 2020 to 2022, she served as the artistic director of the 59th Venice Biennale, where she curated the acclaimed exhibition, The Milk of Dreams, which drew over 800,000 visitors and was celebrated for its focus on metamorphosis, the definition of the human, and for being the first biennial to feature a majority of female artists. That's noteworthy. Cheers. I'm going to stop. Cecilia was telling me last night that this was also a time during COVID where she was doing so much of this research, and seeing the exhibition, I can say, also as a printmaker, there were more prints than I've ever seen in a biennial, so that's also noteworthy, and so much depth to that show that it's very, very memorable. She also served as the artistic director of the inaugural edition of Art Basel Cities, Buenos Aires in 2018, and was a curator of the Italian Pavilion in the 57th biennial in 2017. Over the past 20 years, Cecilia has developed deep expertise in commissioning and producing ambitious artworks for public space and unconventional sites. She also curated Making Their Mark, the first public presentation of the Shah Garg Collection in New York in 2023 and at the Berkeley Art Museum in 2024. And she can tell you how they looked there. I saw both of them. But let's welcome Cecilia here to St. Louis. She's originally from Milan, and this is her first trip to St. Louis, so we want to keep her here longer. Yeah. Sabine Eckmann, of course, is a German art historian based here in St. Louis. She is the William T. Kemper Director and Chief Curator of the Kemper Art Museum and the co-curator of the museum's presentation of Making Their Mark. Her research interests focus on 20th and 21st century art, with particular emphasis on German and European art, as well as art and politics, medium aesthetics, and critical theory. She has curated numerous award-winning projects, including Reality Bites, Making Avant-Garde Art in Post-War Germany in 2007, and which received the Emily Tremaine Foundation Award for Curatorial Innovation. In 2015, she co-edited New Objectivity, Modern German Art in the Weimar Republic, which won the College Art Association Alfred Barr Jr. Award and Association of Art Museum Curators Award of Excellence. Her recent exhibitions, of course, include Ai Weiwei Bare Life in 2019, when we first opened the museum, and the Caterina Grossa exhibition, Studio Paintings, in 2022. Let's hear it for Sabine. Originally from Ahmedabad, India, Komal Shah migrated to the US in 1991 to study computer science in California. After completing her master's degree at Stanford University, she earned an MBA from the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley, and later held executive positions at Oracle, Netscape, and Yahoo. Yahoo. In 2008, she left, she left the tech industry to focus on her philanthropic pursuits. Komal and Gaurav began collecting in 2011 and developed a more defined vision in 2014 with a focus on women artists. Today, they amplify the voices of women artists and artists of color through the Shah Garg Foundation, which supports scholarship and public engagement. Their collection now consists of more than 80 works by nearly 70 artists spanning 8 decades. And when I asked Gaurav if now we have all the work here, he said his walls are filled. Their walls are filled back in California, so there's a lot more of that, where that comes from. So please join me in welcoming our panel, Komal Shah, Barbara Kasten, Cecilia Alemani, and Sabine Eckmann, and let's give a special shout out for Komal Shah. Now I think it's my job to turn the panel over to Sabine. Is that right?
Thank you so much, Carmen.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me? No.
No. Yes.
I don't know where it might be. Oh, here. Can you all hear me if I hold it? Yes. Okay, so I will try to hold it. I just want to add quickly that I'm really extraordinarily excited and grateful to Komal and Gaurav for giving the Kemper Art Museum this tremendous opportunity to showing the exhibition here in St. Louis at Washington University. And I'm delighted and very pleased and very happy tonight to share that with all of you and the St. Louis community. I also, Cecilia, want to thank you for this wonderful collaboration. It was great. And who knows, we will talk also in the future. And I do want to also thank Carmen very much. As you heard, he was instrumental in initiating conversations with Komal and Gaurav. So thank you very much for that and for our continuing very constructive and successful collaboration here at the university. And I would also like to acknowledge how grateful I am for the to the university administration for supporting the museum per se, and in particular this exhibition that's not a small feat, specifically in these days where budgets are tight. And lastly, I would, if I would have time, call out every staff member of the museum who helped to make this project possible. But then we would leave immediately, and there would not be the possibility for any discussion in which we want to engage now. But please know, everyone from the registrars to marketing, to publications, to the press office, and so forth, that I'm enormously grateful for the really hard work you put into this exhibition over the last several weeks. So thank you very, very much. And with that, I really would like to go to the first question, which of course is directed towards Komal. So Komal, maybe we can begin this conversation by looking back to where and when all this began, the history of your collection, and also what inspired you to focus on women artists.
Well, that's about 55 years of my life. No, I won't go into that either. But first of all, thank you. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Sabine. And thank you, Chancellor Martin, for this opportunity to be here. All three of you have been extremely supportive of our efforts. And it has been thrilling to see you all come to our shows. And Sabine, you especially have spent so much time studying each show. And I will say, I think Cecilia and I both agree that this is the best presentation. You've really taken it to the next level. When Gaurav saw the presentation, he was also of the same opinion. So we're all bound in this idea. So why I started collecting and why this collection? So I came to the US, as you know, to study computer science. And I've been thinking about this now. So I thought my first calling in life was to be the tech CEO of a billion-dollar company. And I worked hard, and by the age of 30, I had run a $100 million business, you know, knew how to work with men, and clearly believed that I was better than most men in the tech world. And nothing would stop me. And then in 2008, our son, who's a WashU senior and a very happy senior, needed some time for occupational therapy. And that's when I realized that we are programmed as women to be mothers first. And I decided to take a pause from my career to support him. Now, by the way, he is now an exceptionally talented race car driver alongside being a student at WashU. And so that's gone really well thanks to early intervention and thanks to his hard work, quite honestly. But for me, it was a moment where I didn't know what to quite do with myself because all of my thinking had been geared towards having a tech life. And that's when some of my great friends came calling and said, why don't you come on this trip to New York with us to go look at some art? It was organized by the Tate Modern. And so I ended up going to see the Whitney Biennale in 2014, where I was mesmerized by two works, one by an artist called Laura Owens, and one by an artist called Jacqueline Humphreys. Now, these were both significantly large works, over 12 feet tall, gritty, powerful strokes. And in one case, the work by Laura Owens even had like a monkey off of a ladder. It was funny and kitschy. And I initially didn't know that they were women artists, but I thought, wow, these works are strong and muscular and interesting in their own ways, but they're also re-looking at abstraction. And so I certainly got more curious. And I was lucky that the curator of Tate Modern, Mark Godfrey, was with us on this trip. And so he started educating me. And that's when I realized that these artists were women, they were my generation. And Mark introduced me to a few artists who were sort of all colleagues and peers of these artists. That was that point where I decided that this is my story that I'm going to tell, and I'm going to build a significant collection that really celebrates women artists. I'll also say that over sort of that year, I started meeting these artists and becoming friends with them. We were all, you know, the same age, and they were curious about this crazy woman from tech who was making buying decisions all on her own, and you know, who was interested in their work. And so there was a reciprocal friendship almost that developed. But as I got to be friends with them, I realized how dismal their recognition and perception was in the art market. And I couldn't believe it because I truly think that the best artists today are women. So I decided in true sort of Silicon Valley fashion that I'd go against the herd and start building a collection that was really going to celebrate the finest artists that happened to be women. And I'll say this without doubt that my wish list is always still much larger than what I can afford to pay for. In that there are just so many incredible women artists today. And so that's really sort of the crux of the collection journey.
Thank you. But I want to follow up. Unfortunately, we have to ask you some more questions before we can engage in a larger conversation so that we are all on the same page. And when you go through this exhibition, and probably most of you have already visited the exhibition now, or you can do so in 30 minutes or so, it is striking of how big the works are, how colorful the works are, how sensuous the works are, and how feminine they are in the way that they focus on the body and make the visitor also walk and move in order to really experience the works. Having said that, I'm wondering, is there any kind of trait, taste trait, aesthetic preference that guides you when you decide whom to buy and which work to buy?
So again, a slightly circuitous answer, but Gaurav and I thank Gaurav for this, which is introducing me to abstract expressionism. And he and I would go to so many different museums, galleries, whenever we were traveling together. And he introduced me to Rothko and de Kooning and Kandinsky. And what I think came out of it was this shared appreciation of abstraction and of that visual language. So when I saw works by Jacqueline or Laura Owens, and having them sort of now really turn abstraction on its heels and almost make these funny sort of mock gestures at sort of this very male-dominated abstract expressionism, it was refreshing and it was exciting. And so that's sort of one thread as to why abstraction is really at the core of the collection. I do feel that abstraction was denied to a lot of women. I also feel that abstraction really blurs the boundaries of race, gender, and geography, right? And so this was a sort of a mini experiment that I did at home, and we'd have a lot of visitors from museums come to the house for collection visits, and they would see the work. They could not guess the gender of the work because some of them were large, and they thought women only make small works, right? Small, feminine, floral works. And so this is not sort of what their stereotype was of what women could make. And so it was great to sort of have blind testing where they would come see the work, get all excited, and then would discover that all of the artists were women. And so initially the focus was on gendered works, right, where you couldn't tell the gender by looking at the work. The scale is of particular interest to me because I do believe that I wanted to prove to the world that women can conquer scale and have conquered scale, right? It's not just about pretty little paintings. I'm personally drawn to muscular, bold, expressive works, but I also feel that it's almost my sort of way of proving that women can do everything men can and better.
Thank you. And you went, one could say, one step further. You didn't just continue to, what means just, but you didn't continue to collect only. You also had the idea to make more of the whole thing in order to communicate it to all of us, to audiences in the United States. We have to talk about Europe later. So how came this idea to turn the collection into a massive and heavy book and also into an exhibition, because that was a next very bold step.
So I wanted to add one more point despite sort of the muscular painting point, which is about 5 years ago, thanks to the curator Katie Siegel, who is a co-editor of the book, I realized that the critics who defined fine art were all men. So painting and sculpture were included in fine arts, but craft, right? Textiles, ceramics, fiber were all sort of were coined under this very derogatory term called craft. And so I was inspired because of Katie to start collecting textiles and fiber, and you'll see a lot of that in the collection, and to really turn the definition of fine art on its heels. And so you'll see that, and Cecilia, as a design principle, decided to include textiles and have them placed in the same way as paintings. They're all mixed together. In January 2021, the curator, Mark Godfrey, said, why don't we do a book on your collection? And I thought a book sort of felt like a vanity project, right? Look at my new shiny things of sorts. And so I hesitated, but I said, Mark, if Katie Siegel agrees to co-edit this book, then you guys can go ahead. Katie agreed the next day. and so I do believe in, in the fact that when my sort of respected mentors say yes to something, I just want to go with the flow. And so when they said yes, we started working on the book. We were all equally ambitious about the book, and Mark and Katie convinced me that this was not about just the collection, but it was really about true scholarship on women artists. And so they assembled 11 writers. The book is 432 pages. And by the way, I'll say that when I said this to our PR team, she was a little horror-struck, which was, oh, we could market this book as a weapon of self-defense. But it is a huge book. However, I feel that it has the seduction of a coffee table book. Yet there's deep scholarship, 11 writers, 14 artists who wrote about other artists. And so you were there for the book launch in May 23. The book is already in secondary print, and we're very grateful for that. But as we were getting ready to publish the book, the number one question we got asked was, how will you make the collection accessible? And so that's when we realized, oh, we need to do a show. We need to have an exhibition. Now, Cecilia and I have been friends for over a decade. And I have the utmost admiration for Cecilia as a curator, which was certainly heightened during her Venice Biennale. And the fact that 90% of the artists were women, and there was 35% more attendance than ever before, was a true truth point to the fact not just about her excellence in curation and vision, but also that we are all ready to see more women on the walls. And so we had gotten together in November 22 to celebrate the success of her Venice Biennale, and over 2 glasses of champagne, I squeaked. And if you don't mind, Cecilia, would you curate our show? But I hope it doesn't influence our friendship if you don't want to do it. And she said yes. And so that's how our journey began, and Cecilia agreed to curate the exhibition. It was a marvelous opening, November 2nd, 2023. We had over 15 artists come to the show for the opening, and it was so well received. I'll also say that, I know I'm running out of time, but the first day was our press preview day, and the second and the third day I noticed that these same reporters were bringing their mom, their friends, their sisters over personally. And to me, that was a moment, a signal that we were doing the right thing.
Thank you. I think it's time to also make Cecilia more part of this conversation. And I just wanted to ask you, just from a curator's perspective, it's always very different to do an exhibition where you can just select from artist studios, from collections all over in the world, have even artists commission works, or you deal with a set body of work, a private collection. So I think for all of us, and here are also many students who might want to become a curator one day, it would be interesting to know a little bit more of how you approach that from a curatorial perspective.
Of course. Well, thank you also for having me. I'm very excited to be in St. Louis. It's my first time. So it was also my first time of curating a private collection. I've never done it, and I don't work for a museum, so it was also quite a new adventure. And I think, in a way, the book itself was a wonderful was a wonderful inspiration, and I really urge you all, especially the students, to spend time, because it's truly like a magnificent work of art on its own. But I think the hardest task was to be able to tell a story about the collection that was a different story from what I've seen in their home, or what I've seen connecting, knowing very well someone can be a pro and a con, because you want to kind of pay homage to the character and the sort of the ethos of the collectors, while at the same time, as a curator, you want to be able to offer a different entry point. And I think, in a way, the book has done that, and I hope the exhibition has done the same, to sort of offer different doors into the collection and different pairing and dialogues among artists that could be fairly unusual somehow, especially in a museum context. And of course, the collection is incredible, and the show is not necessarily an art historical survey of abstract art. I think the exhibition, the hope is that the exhibition can still talk about these amazing collectors, and at the same time also celebrate the incredible artists that are in the exhibition. So I had a great time. I got to work with artists that I knew, and the other thing that was very exciting for me was that Komal really loves to learn and discover. So I would say a good amount of art in the exhibition and in the book I wasn't familiar with. And I think as a curator, the best part of our job is to learn from what we do, and we try to learn through exhibition making, in different contexts, in different cities. But I think for me was an amazing way of also learning, especially the work of many artists that we would have called maybe 30 years ago, like craft artists, but there are textile pieces and fabric works and ceramic interventions that I wasn't necessarily familiar with. So that was also a great way of pairing famous artists or well-known artists with less-known artists.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I must admit also that for me, there were many artists I did not know and I learned about. And what I really like beyond the 6 sections you developed is that the exhibition sort of messes with also the canon of how we learn about women artists. And I think that is very refreshing and very necessary also specifically at a university. So it's not about deconstructing generally the canon and focusing on women. That already is a big step, but it goes further. We don't see a group, and it could have been easily curated like that, where you say, okay, that's the fiber art movement and the followers and how they changed that, or this is the beginning of abstract painting among women, and these artists chronologically then follow and do something else with that. And so that's sort of what I sort of really found fascinating, that it was not even so, you didn't even make it so easy for me to learn. So I had to look again, oh, okay, she was born then, and the work was done when, or, so you have to look in different ways, and I think that opens our minds, and you have all of a sudden new ideas of how maybe to understand a certain artist, but also certain artistic practices and processes. So congratulations. And having said that, Barbara, I would like to include you in the dialogue, because you are for quite some time part of this art world and part of the very specific art world in which women a network and in which women work and communicate with each other. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your impression, not only how if you like the way your work is displayed or with whom it is put in conversation, but also overall seeing all these women artists from so many different generations and work done at so many different points in their career.
Right. Well, there's so much to point out. That's really a great experience to go through this exhibition, and you've hit on many of them. But for me as an artist, there's several things that I think were important to me, and the first one is, as an artist, to see myself shown among other artists who I really have admired all my life and have had maybe not a personal connection to, but a connection through searching for my place in the art world and my role as an artist, when most of the kind of interest in exhibitions were offered to men, and they dominated the scene, let's face it. And so for me, my ideas were not to combat their position, but to work hard to make mine just as equally, if not better, work than they. And when I came to this iteration of the show, it was my second time in seeing the show because I was also in Berkeley. And that was, it's interesting, first of all, just as an artist, no matter what gender, to see your own work in different locations and in different juxtapositions to other works and understand how you fit into this role. So for me, the most important thing was my personal connection to these women. They were, I felt like I could fit my work into any one of those rooms because the time of my life has been sort of coincidentally the same timeline as most of this work. Oh, there's my work. Oh, how convenient. And this is it's actually a photographic process, and I began most of my work in photography, but I also began my work as a painter, an undergraduate, and as a photographer, I never sought the works in the world. I made my own things to photograph. So this process that I used is a photogram, and it's very painterly because you have to paint an emulsion on a paper, and then you put objects on top of the paper and expose it in sunlight, and then you have a negative image. So the process is definitely the essential element of sunshine and exposure through light, but it also had a different motivation for me in making this, in that I wanted to make a painting that had a photographic element in it and merged with it, and not to expand the photograph, but more to expand the painting elements. So since my interest was mostly in looking at a painting, I looked at people like Joan Mitchell when she was still working, and I'm 10 years or so her junior, but she was a very important person to me. I started sort of midlife in my career. And so, right there in the beginning was somebody who had inspired me. And then we went on through the exhibition yesterday, and I realized that I really related to so many of these women, and some of them were actually my mentor. Trudy Guermonpré has a fantastic weaving, and I studied with her. It's in a room with what's mostly considered craft in some worlds, but in Kamal's world, it's just, another work of art, right? Which is, I agree with. So it was really wonderful to see her attitude about placing things in that perspective. And then another piece in that room, which is still the textiles, is Magdalena Bakanowicz, and she was also a mentor of mine in Poland because I was there on a Fulbright. So I had that immediate connection, and then I remember in the room where I was, and I am here too, Linda Benglis had poured, kind of a plastic kind of paint, and then there was Pat Steer and the dripping, and that was a time period when I was looking at paintings that were made with that process, but there was mostly the men that I was looking at. So it was wonderful to not to discover them here, but during my lifetime, and adding them into my aura of being influenced by women who were doing the same thing, but, in their own style, in their own way. So it made me feel like it's kind of a history of my own career and how I fit in through that time period. So it's an extraordinary experience, and that doesn't happen all the time.
Thank you so much. I think I want to also be a little bit conscious of who we are. What is interesting is that after New York, which was, you know, a space that you could basically shape and form in any way you wanted. The exhibition then traveled to Berkeley and now to us, both university museums, and I did also read somewhere that had a specific meaning for you, and so I wanted to actually ask the question to both of you a little bit, why university museums?
You know, I grew up in India. My parents were very progressive, and they never believed that as daughters we couldn't be less than. And so, in fact, the book is dedicated to them because they really inspired us to reach for the stars. And I think that that inspiration has been very helpful. And what I want students to really see is and feel is that inspiration, that the sky's the limit, that they can do anything and everything. And so we're celebrating greatness here, but we're also about really at the beginning of life to inspire these students, both men and women, to look at excellence without gender and to work hard towards it. So from that perspective, it was very, very important. I'll add a few things. We had an exhibition called Making Their Mark, the Next Generation, sort of a mini exhibition within our exhibition in New York. And we then, in which we hung 100 paintings by the New York City public school students. And I'm so happy we're going to do that here as well. And we had a little celebration at the last day of the show. And a 10-year-old boy stood up, and he had participated in making work. And he is on video saying, I didn't know women artists could be this good. How did we teach our 10-year-olds that the only good artists are men, right? So I think that there's systematic change across every generation that's needed. I think that especially in universities, these are minds that need to see equality as essential and to believe in themselves, especially women. And so it was very important to both Gaurav and I that the shows travel to as many university museums as possible.
Do you have anything to add, maybe from a completely different perspective?
Well, what I would add is that, of course, also the museum space is fantastic. So it's, as this is the third iteration, it's also quite interesting to see how exactly the same show is actually a completely different show depending on the venue. And for those of you who have not seen New York was a very scruffy space. We kind of retrofitted to look like a pseudo-museum. But of course, it was in the capital of contemporary art. So and that's also where I live, which is of course a position of privilege because we have access to so much in terms of contemporary art. And yet when it went to Berkeley and here, I think what's really amazing to think about is for all of you that are students, the idea that you could see these incredible works in person and spend time with them, appreciate not just individual works, but all the dialogues that exist among the works, I think is a great gift for a community, and also realizing that not everybody has the same access to art like we have in different places. So I hope this will be an inspiration for the entire community here.
Thank you. That's great. And I mean, maybe to add, really, we have a very international body of students too. And so I think the collection is so global that it really speaks to the entire body of faculty and students. And I do have to add maybe two things. One is there are many works by really well-known artists that have not been seen here in St. Louis. And I think that also is really an accomplishment of this exhibition, that yes, if you're in New York, frequently, or somewhere else in the world, in one of the centers of art making, like Los Angeles or Berlin or somewhere like that, you do know most of the names, although there are several I did not know after. Also, specifically historical positions I didn't know. But for St. Louis, I think it's a big deal to bring all these works together and also add names and artists, I think, that are not that well known, like Sonia Gomez, for example, in the background, an artist from South America. In addition, and maybe nobody has really thought about that, and it also only came to me right now, but maybe there is a circle between New York and the way the building was, and here the Kemper. The Kemper is, a wonderful building, and the architecture really makes most artists who exhibit here very happy. But conceptually, a university museum is also a place where you can experiment. So beside the fact that, the architecture maybe in New York was very different than here, so maybe what the architecture embodies in New York, a university's museum's identity should actually do here, And so in that sense, there's maybe a circle where that comes together again. Maybe one last question to you, Cecilia. We will open it then to questions from the audience, from all of you. But obviously, I have to say I was big time impressed with your Venice Biennial. Just also the research. And I really had worked also a lot on new objectivity, and there were so many early 1920s artists I didn't know, although I had done a big catalog on that. So I was very impressed with this show, just in terms of a learning experience, just in terms of how it created a new knowledge, and that you really could take photos and say, okay, I will research this even more. So congratulations again. It really was a big deal, I think, for all people who have experienced it. But are there any ideas from that exhibition that spilled over into the curation of this show?
Well, I think there was a sort of parallel mission. Well, perhaps in the Venice Biennale it wasn't so explicit. The show was not a show about women, or it wasn't a show of necessarily only women artists. There were many though. But I tried to be not too vocal about that for several reasons. We can talk another time. But I think to me, the very similar approach or methodology was, in a way, what in Venice I did by bringing in historical works, and here by kind of pairing, if you like, more traditional artworks and what we have called craft or experiment in other mediums. And I think the friction that exists when you put together things that are unexpected is what makes an exhibition special. So I think the methodology was very similar, although, of course, I did also have a few, textile works in Venice, which was exciting because that's not something that you usually see in Venice. But I think, in a way, it was about creating a dialogue with all those stories that have not been told in terms of surrealism and, the beginning of the 20th century. And they were not being told, not even by the Venice Biennale, which has been the most important exhibition in Europe of the past century. So it was an interesting point of departure.
Thank you so much, and obviously to carry this on, because I think some of that also resonates, although I have not yet seen it, in the site Santa Fe International. At least that's what I understand from what I read. Maybe the last word here before we open that is yours, Barbara. Is there any other comment you want to make about the exhibition or your work in the exhibition, or something?
Well,
Yes.
Advice to students is just keep working. That's all you can do, is keep working, forget the trends, do what's important to you, and stay on track with yourself. That's the most important thing to do. And then these wonderful curators will discover you, and sometimes, but the point is sometimes you're not discovered. And that's really hard. And there are certain points in time where you go through that. Everybody does. And so you just have to keep going past that and believe in yourself. That's really what this is about. And I think that the whole show, in my estimation, is on an equal par with men who were working in different forms of abstraction. They didn't rely so much, I don't think, on, well, I can't say that. I was just going to say not on personal experiences, but that's not true. It really, if you're an artist and you have this urge to express yourself, you just have to find a way to do it. And if it's tying yarns in knots, that's your art form. And if it's dripping paint, that's another thing. But, you just do your own thing, basically. And these women all did that. And I was lucky enough to be, in my career, at a time when I could see and sort of be in the same place with some of them. And others are now a lot younger, and they're all doing exciting things. But they have to look back. And you show them this look back to what has happened and who we are as a history. And that's important, too.
Thank you. And with that, we have a couple minutes time for some questions before the exhibition is officially opened and ready to be experienced. Okay. Is there some, Kira, you doing it, or should we have only one mic?
Somebody walked off, they may be having karaoke at home, but we can pass it and then we'll bring it back. So, did you have a question over here?
Why no photography?
It's a good question. Oh, hello. The curator is saying a good question. It is something I don't understand. And truth be told, this show is really about 51% of the world's population. So there are lots of holes. And photography and video art, I'm sure, are big ones. But honestly, I don't understand them. I see a painting and I can understand a painting. I see sculpture, I understand it, but I have to spend a lot more time to really understand what makes a photograph unique. Why is it important? Why is it innovative? And that's going to need some time. So I haven't gotten around to it.
Yes.
Thank you. My question is for Barbara Kasten. Ms. Kasten, when you're creating a work of art, I suppose my question, I'm channeling it through you to all artists because I wonder about this myself. I really don't know the answer. When you're creating a work of art, do you feel you're dialoguing with yourself, or are you focused on a particular process? Are you trying to communicate with an existing tradition, or do you have perhaps a particular viewer in mind?
That's all too intellectual for me. I really function with what I have in my hand, which is the material. So I start with that as the source. Not that I don't have structural ideas or haven't read or seen things that inspire me, including architecture, and I have gone into video and installation, and it's been sort of projection of making a photograph, but I never was trained as a photographer, so I was lucky not to have that prejudice of needing to have a fine art print. I was always experimenting, and that was a fine art photographic print. And I always hated the distinction between the two, that there was an art world and a photo world. And that's what I think, you know, your exhibition is beginning to address those disciplines that cross boundaries. And I think that my work was always in the search of those crossing boundaries.
Any more questions here? There are two more. Do you see? I'm very sorry that I make you exercise tonight.
Oh, geez, Louise, sorry. I have a comment, but then I have a question. Sorry, this was provoked. There is one photographer I saw, a silver gelatin print, as well as the beautiful cyan types and Van Dyke processes. I think it's interesting what you said about photography. I hope one day, one of us, speaking from myself as a photographer who does alternative process, can change your mind. But painters and photographers have been known to be synonymous in many ways. We use brushes, and we use many things within editing as well as alternative process. That is painterly. I hope that you are open-minded to that. However, I have a question in regards to curation. I would love to inspire to be a curator one day. And I was just curious as to what advice you'd have for a young woman or anyone who is new into this world, and what you did or what your journey kind of looked like in becoming such a wonderful curator.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. That's Komal's job. But regarding the question, you know, I think the best advice I always give to young curators is to be curious and to spend as much time as you can in learning. And the learning can be going to school. It can be reading a book. But we're so lucky to live in an amazing society where art thrives and where artists are here and approachable. So spend time with artists, learn how you do a studio visit. And, you know, it can be a famous artist, but can really be your colleagues down the hall. And, you know, exercise your eyes in understanding how you define what's good and what's bad, and it's okay if it's bad, but like go see art as much as you can and jump onto every opportunity of doing an exhibition that can be literally at your local cafe, and that's fine, or you can be in the gallery of the museum eventually, but really try, you know, our job is so complex. I think a curator maybe 30 years ago was a very, very different job. Now it's also a very pragmatic job, but at the same time, the exposure we have to art is much wider. So just, you know, abandon yourself to art in all possible ways, and also try to write as much as you can. It doesn't matter if it doesn't get published. You can always publish on your own social media, but try to, you know, write reviews and, again, learn and train your eyes as much as you can. The way I started this job was a bit more traditional, if you like. I did a curatorial program at Bard in New York. So I took the easy way, if you like. I went to school, but that was also a very different time. You know, it was over 20 years ago, and there were very few curatorial programs around the world. So I don't know if I would necessarily suggest you to go to do a master in curatorial practice. I think there are many other opportunities to get into, to sneak into this world.
I maybe just want to add, so I don't know if you go to school here or if you're a graduate or undergraduate, but the museum actually does have a curatorial fellowship, and we just announced it, so it's open to for all students to apply for this program. It's the so-called Greenberg undergraduate curatorial program, and it will result, after a long learning process with faculty and with curatorial advisors, in an exhibition in the museum's teaching gallery. So please, whoever is here, look it up on our website, and maybe you have some good ideas. It's also, we encourage teams, curatorial teams, to apply for that fellowship.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. As a woman from New York, a Latina woman from New York, whose mother is also a Latina painter from New York, she wanted to be here today and couldn't. But we have very different perspectives, I think, on what we focus on in the art world at large and in the world at large. She's an immigrant. And the way that I have been thinking about this a little bit is that I see art as very cyclical and fashion as very cyclical in particular, right? Like a lot of people in my generation are actually using computer science to track fashion trends, and we're seeing Y2K and the 80s and as far back as the 60s coming back. And you highlighted a lot of fiber arts from the 60s, and that's one thing that I see coming back quite a lot right now. So I'm curious, what influences your selection of emerging artists, of emerging styles, of what the next big thing is going to be? New York is wonderful, but it's very saturated as well.
Cecilia. Come on.
I think that's an excellent question. I will say that I don't chase trends. I don't know what the next big thing will be. If I knew, I'd have a much larger collection because I could really profit from that knowledge or that vision. But it is more about belief, right? And it's more about sort of what the eye sees as excellent. And I am surrounded by great curators who've taught me to really appreciate the innovation, right? Why is this important? Why is this innovative? How does it add to the arc of art history? Right? And who is it having a dialogue with? Are things that one must certainly evaluate after falling in love with the work. And so every single work you'll see in this exhibition and beyond, this exhibition is about a third of the collection that we have. And for older artists and younger artists, the point is I have to really fall in love with the work and be excited and mesmerized. And then to... thanks to the curators around me, to ask questions of why is this important. And I'd say for emerging artists, for example, like Arya Dean, there's a sculpture called Gut Punch, and I guess she should not be called an emerging artist anymore, but she's in her late 20s. And this work was in the Whitney Biennale. I was just blown away visually. And then sort of course, all of the background knowledge about how it was created using simulation, et cetera. But then there's also sort of a personal viewpoint about how Black women who are walking around New York and elsewhere find that sometimes they're received as being different and how that feels like a gut punch. And so to me, there was sort of this confluence of various factors that really attracted me to the work. And of course, it was already in the Whitney Biennale, so it was blessed by curators.
I think this was actually a wonderful conclusion to our panel. So thank you very much. Thank you all very much. And the exhibition is officially opened now. Thank you.